Hi, welcome back to PMC Knives and Tools. Today we're going to have a quick chat, not a long video, just about some very cheap nameless knives that I bought online a while ago, not recently, that I modified for one reason or another. So, a quick chat about A, cheap knives, and B, knife modification, DIY, changing things yourself. We'll start with this little knife here. Now, this was bought from Wish.com at least a year ago, possibly two. My memory fails me in my old age. And it was very cheap, £3 to £5, including postage from China, something like that, really cheap. And the photos of it, as always, on these kind of cheap drop shipping, cheap budget apps, were probably photoshopped because it didn't look quite like this. And it arrived looking somewhat different than I had imagined. But I wasn't that bothered because, I'd bought it as a pocket money type knife. I sometimes buy little cheap knives just to mess about with. I keep them in my collection. I use them a couple of times, then I gift them to friends and family. I always have around 100 knives at any one time, but the cheaper ones and the smaller ones I usually don't own for very long. I usually own them for a little while, keep them as a novelty, and then pass them on to someone, unless I really feel attached to them. So, long story short, this one turned up and it had a button on the side which wasn't there in the advertisement. In the advertisement, they had photoshopped that button out. And what the button did was, if you pressed it, it was right here where this hole is, the knife would flick open by itself. An automatic out the side knife. Now, an automatic spring assisted self opening out the side or out the front knife is illegal in the UK. Not only illegal to carry, but illegal to even own, which is a very important distinction. You can carry a lock knife even though they're not technically legal, so long as you have a justifiable reason to have a lock knife. You cannot even own, never mind carry, an automatic knife that opens by itself by machine. So this was a big problem. And of course, I noticed that the second that I opened the package, pressed the button, and the knife blade went chung and shot out. So I sat down, opened my toolbox, took out a screwdriver. Very strangely, it's not a Torx screw that holds the pivot of the blade. That's very unusual. It's a Phillips screw. Very unusual. So I grabbed the screwdriver, I took it apart, completely dismantled the knife, and inside was not only a springing mechanism, but also a liner lock. So I removed them completely, and then I took a couple of silver galvanised steel washers from my toolbox, and I placed them on either side of the blade, along with a couple of washers that were originally in it to make the size difference, because it's quite a wide knife. And then I put it all back together again. So I completely removed the mechanism, the springing automatic action, and the lock. Also, on the face here, it had the words Doom Blade, which it didn't say on the advert either. That was also photoshopped out of the advert. So I just roughly, very carelessly sanded that off with a file or an emery board or something that I had sitting nearby. Because UK law also has a little bit of a strange recent addition about what they call quote unquote zombie knives. And the zombie knives law is very vague. But one of the key wordings in the zombie knife law is blades that have depictions of violence or inscriptions of violence on the blade. So something that says Doom Blade probably isn't too cool either in the eyes of the law. So I sanded that off. So I removed the spring opening mechanism, which is completely illegal to even own. I removed the liner lock, and I sanded off the words Doom Blade. And then I also had in my toolkit, in my knife toolkit, just a little aftermarket thumb stud, which I got from eBay for about £5. So just added that to it. So it's still quite stiff because I used quite heavy duty washers, but it's now just a friction folder. It's now completely UK legal. It's still a bit of an odd knife, and it's honestly not one that I carry really at all, because even though it's legal now, it's just not really my cup of tea. I've never got rid of it though, because I took the time to modify it, so it just stays in my collection as a little piece of objet d'art, a little collectible. So there we go. Unbranded, odd, falsely advertised automatic knife. This one here, this is by the brand Silverline, which is just a budget tool company that you'll see in lots of hardware shops and sometimes online. It's in the style of your classic Buck lockback, but it's quite small. You know, it's a lot smaller than like a 110 or a 112. It is in comparison to my hand, for example. Let's do a quick size comparison. Here's a Benchmade 940 for comparison. You know, it's much smaller. Okay, tiny. Here's a Swiss Army knife for comparison. So it's about 3 inches long, but the same size as a Swiss Army knife. And all I did to this one was the blade arrived from the packet pretty dull, just a crap factory edge. Again, this was about £5, something like that. It's got a little bit of blade, lateral play. The lock's snappy, but not the greatest. It's a little bit, you need to put quite a bit of force in to open it. So I reprofiled the edge. It's now shaving sharp. I do have a YouTube short on my channel of me shaving a bit of my leg with it, which really takes off quite a bit of hair, and I look quite silly in shorts. And again, I just had one of these aftermarket thumb studs, this one in a silver colour to match the blade, and again just added that to it. So not much of a modification there, just sharpened it and added the thumb stud, but it is quite a nice little knife, just as a beater, just for cutting up cardboard boxes and odd jobs like that. I wouldn't use it as a serious knife. Here's another little strange one, again from, it was either Wish.com or AliExpress, one or the other, I forget which, at least a couple of years ago. It came in this really cool, it was advertised as zebra wood. I don't think it is zebra wood for what it's worth, and that blue colour has almost certainly been added chemically. It's not original. But the scales are really, really smooth. Very tactile, it feels nice in the hand, but it's absurdly thick. Look at this, for example, in comparison to it. It's really thick. It's as thick as Victorinox Fieldmaster, which is like a 4-layer Swiss Army knife. It's really thick. And it came with a liner lock, and the liner lock was a little bit janky, a little bit stiff, not great quality, didn't engage that well. So I pushed it back with my thumb, and then I gripped it with a pair of pliers, and lo and behold, won't you know, it just bent out of place. So maybe I modified it intentionally, maybe it was a fluke, but once I realised that it was easy to move the liner lock frame just out the way, I just bent it with pliers into a straight shape, which you shouldn't be able to do. With appropriate steel, it wouldn't do that. But I did that. I bent the liner lock out of the way because it wasn't working properly anyway. It was engaging sometimes and not others. And then, because I had done that, the blade would then just flop open because the liner lock was no longer engaging. So I got my Torx drivers out, took the scales off, took the blade out, and replaced the original washers with thicker ones. So it now just has a kind of a friction action. So it now opens with a bit of resistance from the washers. This little chunky, thick blade here does have quite a nice point on it. Does have quite a high hollow grind, but it would have to because the blade stock is ridiculously thick. It's just a chunky knife. No idea why it's so chunky, but it is quite novel. I've only carried it a little bit. I've used it a couple of times. I cut some flooring with it, which seems like a strange thing, an odd choice to cut with it. But it happened to be what I had on me at the time, and I was in my workshop doing some hobby stuff on my workbench. Believe it or not, I was using some offcuts of flooring to add an extra layer to my workbench where I do my rough cuts and sawing and stuff, just to, you know, help protect the upper layer of the workbench. And I used it to trim those. And yeah, it did okay, it did fine. No idea what the blade steel is. Nameless blade steel, something stainless, something rubbish, something cheap. But there you go. A little strange sort of knife that I paid a couple of pounds for a couple of years ago on a Chinese phone app, and received something that was slightly faulty but kind of novel. So I modified it a bit. Disengaged the lock, replaced the washers, and there we find ourselves. So 3 really cheap Chinese budget knives. I think that was about £3 or £5. That was £5. That was about £3. And I put thumb studs that cost about £5 each onto these two, and some washers that cost a couple of pence into this one and this one. So a bit of modification to try and make cheap, crappy knives either legal or more usable. Legal in this case, more usable in this case, and more convenient to open one-handed in this case. And there we go. That is the video. Have a great day, guys. Take care.